Hey guys, it's Katie here with Life Mundane and welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad to have you, and if you are new here, let me introduce myself real fast. My name is Katie and I'm a homeschool mom, a second generation homeschool mom of 6 beautiful kiddos, and I'm here to help you. My job is to equip you, to help you, walk alongside you. I want to encourage you in your biblical parenting. I want to help you in your homeschooling, and I want to give you resources that'll help you do both of those things. So today we're going to be talking about how to plan your homeschool year in just 5 days. I'm going to be showing you a system of how to do this and how to homeschool, or how to plan your homeschool in 5 days using the Organized Homeschool Planner from Not Consume Ministries. This is an amazing tool to help you guys work through this process bit by bit, step by step, so it's not so overwhelming to conquer in 5 days. But if you don't have this planner, not a problem. You can totally do the same systems, the same steps, and it will get you to the same results. So let's get started. The first place we start with our planning process on day 1 is we need to look at our vision, the big picture. Now you might be going, Katie, you don't understand. I'm not a homeschooler. I never intended to be a homeschooler. I'm only homeschooling because I don't want my child sitting in the same desk wearing a mask for 6 hours a day. I feel ya. I get it. Your plan may be to put them back in school as soon as you possibly can. It might also be that you have been thinking about this for a long time and you're like, Katie, I know where I'm going and I've got it. I know where I'm headed. I understand. But I promise you this is a day worth spending, okay? Take one day, set it aside, really dig deep, and help you to understand why you're doing what you're doing and where are you going with this. Because guess what? Even if the plan is to put them right back in school next year or in the future, you need to know that because that's going to affect your decisions. It's going to affect what curriculum you pick. You need to find one that's in line with your school system and that's not going to cause them to be behind. If you are not planning to put them back in school, at least not right away, you have a lot more flexibility and freedom to do school in a way that might work better for them. And that's where this planner comes in. So I'm going to show you guys how I use it. And like I said, you can take these general steps and help yourself. But what I love about this planner is it breaks it down. And instead of saying, what's your vision for homeschooling? It says, okay, that's a big question. Let's take this chunk and this piece and this piece and this piece. And we're going to put all these pieces together till at the end, when it asks for your vision for homeschooling, all you have to do is take this part and this part and this part and this part that you've already written out, put it together, and you have a nice cohesive vision that really does encompass everything you're wanting. And it's going to just help you think through more. So I'm going to show you guys how we've used this and what we've done. So on day 1, we talked about, why does your family homeschool? Why are you planning to homeschool? What's your motivation? It can be COVID. It could be because you feel like God's calling you to do it. It could be because you want to watch your kids grow in the Lord. Whatever the answer is, no right or wrong. Why are you homeschooling? What are the benefits? All right. Even if this wasn't originally what you were planning on doing, there are benefits that you can think of, I'm sure. Things that you want to make sure you do in your homeschool, things you want to avoid. I see so many times people pulling their kids out of the school system, public or private, because it's not working for their kid. And then they turn around and they put them at home and they mimic the school system because that's all they've ever known, right? This is the frame reference that we have. And so we put them in desk and we make them sit for 6 hours a day and we only give them a 20-minute recess and all these things. And yet, even though we pulled them out of that environment because that wasn't what we wanted for them or that wasn't what was working for them, we've basically put them in the same environment at home. So understand what you don't like about other ways of doing it. Write it down so you make sure you don't copy those same things, right? All right, you're going to want to look at, what do you want your family life to look like? And that might sound like a really silly question to you. What do I want my family life to look like? What does that have to do with homeschooling? What does that have to do with anything? I'm not looking to revamp my family. But the truth is that homeschooling will affect all of your family life. I know some of you guys know this very well. Some of you are banging down the door asking the question, how am I supposed to work and be a mom and homeschool my kids, be in charge of their education, take care of my house and be a wife and all these other things? It affects everything. But you need to know, what ideally do you want your family life to look like? For us, this was easy. If you guys have seen my Facebook page, my Instagram, any of those things, you know that we have a big sign in our house that we had custom make. I'll insert a picture here for you guys for our family that goes over kind of whatever our core values. We want to encourage play and imagination in our house. That's super important, that creativity. We want to, telling the truth is super important in our house. being Christ-centered, having good communication, healthy relationships, having family meals together, and just an environment of learning. Those are things that we had already written there. So that was very easy for me to do. This might be a little bit tougher, but I would encourage you to take the time to do it. You're also going to look at what things are important to you. And so looking in your family life, your church life, your community life, what things stand out to your family? And again, you might be thinking, what does this have to do with homeschooling? But it does matter what you want to do. The final step to this, and there's more steps in this planner that you could do in this section that will make this process so much easier. But the final step I want to point out to you guys, if you are following along without the planner, is that you want to do a life goals worksheet for your kid. I understand this might be overwhelming at this point, but I promise this is a good practice to get into. Think about, just zoom out for a second and think about when your child graduates from high school, what do you want them to be able to do? What skills do you want them to have? And the 4 areas they divided into that I think are really helpful are the spiritual, the physical, the academic, and the social emotional. What do you want your child to be equipped with when they leave your home? No matter what schooling option you're going to be doing, or if you're going to be doing a hybrid of options, what do you want them to be equipped with? So some of the things that we want our kids to be equipped with is I want them to be equipped with an arsenal full of memory verses. Because, I can't control whether my child is saved or not. I can't control whether they become a Christian. That's the Holy Spirit's department, not mine. But what I can do is I can faithfully train my kids. I can teach them apologetics and teach them why we believe what we believe. I can introduce them to God and who He is and who He created them to be. And I can give them tools, spiritual tools, like teaching them how to pray, giving them Bible verses, those kinds of things. I can equip them for those things. And if God so chooses, He then can use those things in my kids' life. Some of the social, emotional, physical ones is I want them to be competent in the jobs that God calls them to do, which is going to require a little fine tuning depending on the child. If I see them being interested in going in a particular area, I want to make sure, if my son wants to be an engineer, I need to make sure that he has the academic skills in science and math that he is going to need for that. So some of those things, I don't know all of those future things, but I do know things like I want my kid to have a really good work ethic. I want them to have a heart of service and to be able to have the eye to see those things. I want my child to have good life skills, and that is life skills financially. That's life skills when it comes to taking care of a home and cooking, but that's also life skills when it comes to maintenance on the car and house projects, things like that. Not having to know how to do everything in the world, but knowing how to find the information. And that's a big thing academically for us too. Taking that kind of big picture. And why does that help you? Well, it's going to help you, like I said, knowing why you homeschool. It's going to help you understand on those hard days when you're like, man, I just want to quit. Why did I do this? You can go back and say, oh, remember? We didn't want this. Remember that thing that we didn't want, or we do want? We didn't want that. That's why we're doing this. Or you can look back and say, when you're like, man, I feel like we have too many subjects going on and we're never getting around to doing a full schedule of school. Back up a second. Look at that vision, look at those priorities and go, all right, but what are my top priorities? What did I set aside and say to our family that these are the things? If they have a year of no grammar, is that going to hurt them? Probably not. So it's okay if we let that go for this year. So the next area that we're going to plan is our kind of starting to look at more of what you would typically think of, right? Your curriculum or things like this. Now, day 2 is a doozy. I'm not going to lie. If I were going to split this up a little bit differently, I probably would split day 2 into day 2 and 3 and make this a 6-day thing. But you can do it in one day. I did it one day, but I also have had a little more experience with this. So if you're brand new to homeschooling, maybe give yourself some grace on this one. But the first thing you do is find your state requirements and write them down. I know my state requirements. I've made videos on Kansas state requirements. But I still every year go in, look them up, and write them down because laws change. And it's important to make sure that you are up to date on what is the information and what you need. You want to evaluate last year. If you homeschooled last year, take the time to evaluate it. What went well? What didn't go well? Was there something that was lacking that you were missing? Is there something that needs to be removed completely? This workbook also has, it's a planner, but it's got, like I said, so many workbook type pages. It has ways that are going to help you discover what curriculum style is best for you by looking and researching the styles a little bit, thinking through what do you need as a mom? What do your children need? It's got work pages to work you through every single section. So I'm not going to go over all that right now, but you guys can definitely check out the planner to see more about that. But it'll also go through your annual plan. How many days are you required to teach? So in Kansas, we are required to do an equivalent of public school, which is typically recommended to track days. So 186 days. What days of the week will you teach? That's up to you. Did you know you don't have to teach Monday through Friday? Did you know you could do the weekend school? You can do evening school. You have total flexibility unless for some reason your state law says otherwise, but I don't believe any of them do dictate which days. They might dictate how many or how many hours, but not which days. So we do instruction. We do formal instruction Monday through Thursday. We take Friday off of formal book work, but it is still a school day, and we do a fun schooling thing. If you guys want to see what we do for fun schooling, what that kind of looks like, what does that even mean, be sure to subscribe because I'm going to have a video coming out at the end of this month explaining that whole process and some of our favorite things to do during our fun schooling days. It also goes through things like what is going to be your first start date? What's going to be your end date? What holidays do you want to make sure you take off? See a lot of people asking scheduling questions on Facebook like, well, is there a specific schedule we have to follow or whatever? No, right? That's up to you. You can follow a traditional public school schedule, but you can make your own schedule. That's the beauty of it. One of the benefits of homeschooling is not only being able to adjust it to meet your family's needs. So if you're sick for 2 weeks, you can take those 2 weeks off and just do 2 weeks later, but also being able to take vacations when the whole rest of the world is not. COVID kind of stopped some of that, but there are benefits of that. You're not stuck on the same schedule as everybody else. So just think about what works best for you and your family. So then you want to take an annual plan. You can use this planner, like I said, or you can print off a year at a glance sheet. You can just Google that online and print it off and just make a plan. Hold this plan loosely, all right? But just mark the days. The day you want to start, mark the days that you want to take off for a break, for a vacation. Give yourself some buffer days. I always give myself some teacher training / work days. Those count as school days. They count for school days in public school. They count for school days here. But I do try to plan them ahead of time. Things like my local homeschool convention, I mark those off as teacher training days. Also, if there are maybe like once a semester, once a quarter, something like that, I want to take a day just to kind of prep what's coming ahead, or a seminar or an online course that I want to take so I can be a better teacher. I do those things to keep up. And that while those are not requirements, I highly suggest them for your mental health as well as for your academic health. So I mark those days off in orange. You also can mark off days if you're doing a co-op, depending on the layout of the co-op, but most co-ops typically take a good chunk of the day. So I usually will just set aside the day completely for co-op, but I will mark those as well. Mark down your plan, then hold it loosely. Pray over it. Understand it may not be perfect. And then you may want to print off a second copy to actually circle and keep records of what you did actually do. But planning for it will help you succeed, I promise. This is a huge, huge thing. This is altering. I see people all the time asking, Katie, do I need to sit down and write out months worth of lesson plans and things like that? I don't recommend doing that ahead of time. And here's why. Things change, especially if this is your first year of homeschooling. But even if it's not, things change. Maybe a curriculum's not working out for you. Maybe your child is way further ahead of what you bought. Maybe they're behind and they're struggling. You don't want to write out a whole year's worth of lesson plans and then ditch a curriculum halfway through the year and you did all that work for nothing. So here's what I recommend doing instead, all right? It's very, very simple. It might seem so simple that it doesn't seem like it counts, but it totally does. So you're going to write down the subjects that you want to do for your child. You are going to write down how many lessons or how many chapters or how many however it's divided. You're going to write down that here. Then you're going to write down, you're going to write down how many days a week you want to do that. So we have some things like math or reading that have a lot of lessons, right? They have 130 lessons or, 100 something lessons. With those, we're going to do those every day. Now, we do only do book work Monday through Thursday, but we do a longer school year as well. We do September through June. So just know that. But we're going to do those things 4 times a week. The few things that we do daily is we do Bible daily, so including Fridays. We do, my son is going to be doing CogniFit, which is like a brain training thing to work on his cognitive skills. He will be doing that daily, including Fridays. But then there's other things like science and history that we'll only be doing 2 times a week. So we will do 2 times a week, and then you write down your plan. What does that look like? So for some things like math, you're going to do teaching textbooks, and they're going to do a lesson a day. Pretty straightforward. I don't need to sit down and write all that out for them when it doesn't change from day to day, right? Grammar, they're going to do grammar 2 times a week, and they're going to do a lesson each week. Science, there's only 10 lessons in their science book. We're gonna do it 2 times a week, but these chapters are quite long. These are big, big lessons. So we actually take 2 weeks to do 1 lesson. So just doing that simple math of going, okay, this is how many is here. This is what's realistic to get done in this day. So this is what we need to make it look like. All of this stuff is now on autopilot, okay? We do a chapter, 1 to 2 chapters of Story of the World every single week, meeting twice a week. And basically if it's a short chapter, we'll group 2 together. And if it's not, we'll do 1 chapter together. I don't worry too much about which ones we'll combine. I just kind of play that by ear. I might check maybe every 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, and kind of look ahead as I do on my monthly plan, which I'll show you here in a second. But I will look at my monthly plan and say, oh, those look like short chapters. We can combine those. But I don't worry about that now. But the rest of this is just kind of on autopilot, and it makes your life so much easier to sit there and just divide it like this and know what you need to get done. And like I said, I've had to skip over a bunch of the stuff just for time's sake, but please know there's so much more in this book to help you work through this. Other things you might want to look at is what time of day does your family work best? Do any of your kids take nap time or quiet time that you need to work around? Before creating your actual daily schedule, you want to look through and say, what are the things that are already in your schedule that are non-negotiable? Do you have like a physical therapy, speech therapy, something like that you have every single week that's the same that you're going to have to work around? Do you have a co-op that you're a part of? Do you have Bible study, church events, sports, activities, things like that you need to work around? Do you even have just the morning routine of like breakfast, get dressed, ready, whatever? Block those out, all right? I see so many people who work meticulously hard making a schedule to say, okay, we're going to do this and this and this, and it's going to look the same every single day of the week. And then they forget to factor in piano lessons and other things like that happen every single week, and it throws them off. And it's tragic, right? They spent all this time planning, but they weren't thinking through all the process. So you want to think about through the things that are non-negotiable. You want to think through those things that can't be moved around and changed and adjust. Maybe you want to stack as many of your things as possible. If you have piano lessons and therapy and co-op, maybe you want to try and stack those into 1 or 2 days a week so that you can have heavier academic days on the opposite days. And on those 2 days, you're going to have a lighter schedule and maybe just hit the basics of Bible, math, reading, language arts kind of stuff, and just skip the other history, science, and whatever. So just think through those things when you're doing it. Then you can start actually looking at your child's specific schedule and what it's going to look like. But think through what works for your family. Like I said, if you have kids that nap in the afternoon, then maybe you want to save your teacher-intensive subjects for the afternoon time when the babies are napping. For us, all of my kids, including and myself, do best work in the morning. Our brains are freshest in the morning, and after lunch, we just kind of start getting kind of tired. So we do our brain heavy intensive stuff, our math, reading, language arts stuff, all of that in the morning. And then we focus the things that are more project-based, enjoyment, reading, listening kind of things in the afternoon when the babies are napping. Even though it would be nice to do them without all of the interruptions, it's still better productive time in the morning. So now in our planning, now that we've kind of figured out what curriculum we need to use, how we need to divide it, which subjects we need to do which days, it's a good idea to make a rough schedule. Now, I am not bashing hour by hour schedules. If you are that kind of person, please do it. All right. But a little experience from a homeschool mom who's been there is understand that things are always going to take longer than you think. And you need to plan in some buffer in there and give yourself a lot of grace when you're figuring this out. The typical rule of thumb is it takes about 3 years to really just nail your schedule to feel like, hey, I really know what I'm doing and we found our groove. It doesn't mean it's bad years for the first 3 years. It just means it takes some experimenting and figuring out what works best for you and your family and your schedule and your life. So give yourself that grace and understand that it might be better to chunk your schedule. And what I mean by that is to take chunks like your morning time. This would be your time from the time you wake up to before you start school. What do you want to have done in your day? What do you want to get done? What do you want your kids to get done? Get as specific or as general as you like, but just think through those things. Like, what time do you want your kids to wake up? What time do you want you to wake up? And make sure you make it realistic, all right? If your kids have never woken up before 8 a.m. before, at earliest, maybe consider starting at 7:30. Don't have a 6 a.m. start time if they've never woken up before 8 before. All right, now with school, you're going to chunk your day. What kinds of things, what time would you ideally like to start school? And just know that our day starts at around 7 a.m. My day starts at about 5. But my kids wake up at 7 a.m. or they have to wake up no later than 7 a.m. during this school year. And we do that. We have a bunch of things we do. And we don't start school till 9 or 9:30. So a lot of people think it has to be like as soon as we enjoy having those leisure mornings. We get some chores done. We do our personal devotions. We do things like that. And then we get started with our school because it helps the whole day run smoother. So then you're going to list the things that you would like to get done ideally between school time, the beginning of school time, and lunch. Now, for younger grades, they might be able to get the entire schedule done before school time and lunch. For my kids, they could do that. If I was working with just one kid, they probably could. But because I am multitasking 6 children at one time, we don't do it quite that way. We do those intensive one-on-one subjects, those more brain power subjects in the morning. Then we have our lunch and we take a lunch break. So while I'm cooking lunch, my kids are outside playing. They're having their recess time. A lot of times they'll eat their lunch outside, or if they come inside, they'll listen to a podcast while they're eating. But they get a good hour-long lunch break. And then we go into our afternoon schedule. So what kinds of things do you want your afternoon to look like? This can include last minute school things that need to be wrapped up. It can include free time. Do you want to allow TV? Do you not want to allow TV? Things like that. And then dinner time. What ideally is your dinner time you'd like to start? And what activities do you want to happen after dinner time? Hold it loosely. It's supposed to be a guide, not a ball and chain, all right? So don't hold yourself to it to a point that you make yourself frustrated. All right, so those are the first 3 days, and I promise you those are the most intensive days. It gets easier. So deep breath, and we're gonna wrap this up. So the next day, the 4th day, you're gonna work on looking at your space and designing your space. This is where this workbook is so incredibly helpful. This is one of the areas that I love. I've never seen anything like this in other planners or workbooks. So it talks through your current space. Your current space may be your dining room table. Your current space may be an entire dedicated schoolroom. But you're gonna go through things and say, what are the things you love about the space? The way it is. What are things that don't seem to be working if you've done this in the past? Where do you tend to learn? So for us, we learn at the kitchen counter. My kids love to sit at the kitchen counter. They love to do it at the dining room table. They like to work on the couch or at the coffee table, and they like to work outside. And they do all of that every single day. So that's kind of my space. You also look through things like, where are you going to store things? We are getting ready to do a homeschool room tour coming up very, very soon. I'm just putting all the finishing touches on it. And then we will show you what our homeschool space looks like, but we do not have a dedicated homeschool room, and I am totally okay with that. You can work with whatever God has given you. He will equip you for what He's called you to do. So just understand that, be thankful for what you have, and make it work. It also gives you lists of things that you can do, like learning materials. What learning materials will you need? From little things like crayons and glue and pencils to big things like binders and computers and tablets and things like that. And it's going to help you make a plan. It's going to help you categorize. What do you use every day? What do you use, less often? Maybe your teacher's manuals you don't need access to constantly. And it's going to help you divide up and figure out, all right, if this is used every day, it probably needs to be in a more easily accessible area. If this is something that's not going to be used as often, it doesn't mainly have to be in our main living area. Maybe it's going to be in a closet downstairs or on a bookshelf away from the other learning spaces. So this really helps you work through that. But just take some time. Think through the space you have. Think about how you can adjust it. We can plan and dream all day long about what we wish we had, but let's just be content with what we have and work with that and see what we can do. And every year we can adjust, we can tweak, we can make it just a little bit better. All right, so finally we're gonna work with our individual students. So that is day 5. We are gonna look, and this is crazy, crazy important, guys. We're gonna look at the level of independence that our child is at. So they list it as 5 different levels. There's the beginning, which is where the student requires supervision of every subject and task. okay? They need you to be there to teach it. They need you to be there next to them while they do it. They need you to check up on them regularly. They can do nothing independently. That is typically your younger age kids, your preschool, maybe kindergarten age kids. Stage 1 is where your students are beginning to work on very small tasks independently. Okay, we're talking about 10, 15-minute tasks. So maybe I still have to be there to teach it and still have to be in the near vicinity, but I can maybe walk over and unload the dishwasher while so-and-so is finishing their math worksheet or doing something like that. And that doesn't mean they can do every task independently. It just means they can do some tasks independently. Stage 2 is when a student can work independently on a task and then bring it back to you once it's completed after you have already taught or explained the concept. They're responsible enough to follow through and finish without constant reminders. So like for my kids, we do teaching textbooks. The computer teaches them the math. They will do the problem. If they have a question, they'll come and get me, but they will do that problem and they will bring me the finished result when they are done. So they are definitely in that stage 2 and starting to work into that transition stage. And the transition stage is where the student begins teaching themselves some of their own subjects, but not all of them. They can start working alone on most things and they don't require minute-by-minute monitoring. And you still check in daily, but you don't need to check in hour-by-hour, minute-by-minute kind of thing. Then there is the independent student. This is typically when you get around to high school age. This student works completely on their own. They teach themselves every subject. They help plan and manage their days. Maybe you're giving them a list and saying, this is what you need to get done this week. You divide it how you want. Let me know, turn it in. They can include due dates, long-term projects. Typically, that's going to be at least 6th grade and up, if not more high school, okay? And your kids might be somewhere between. A lot of mine are in between kind of that second stage and transition. They're working on transitioning to more independence. But you want to think through those things as you are scheduling out your year, as you are giving them assignments. Don't expect them to do these things when they're not ready for it, when you haven't trained them for it. This is also going to help you to decide what your scheduling needs to look like, all right? For most of my kids, it is a matter of just do the next thing. Do the next lesson in math. Do the next lesson in science. Those kinds of things, because I've divided it. I know how many we need to get done in a week, or like we do all about reading for some of my kids. And for that, instead of saying it's a lesson, because that's not how it's really divided, we say it's 20 minutes. Every day you have to do 20 minutes of reading. Sometimes that's lesson, sometimes that's less, sometimes that's more, 20 minutes. So they know those things. But this year, as I'm starting to have some that are moving into that transition period, I want to give them more responsibility. So typically, I have scheduled it out and said, okay, this child 1's going to start on the computer for math, while child 2 does reading, and then they're going to swap because we have to share computers. Then they're going to swap. And child 3 is going to work on her math while child 4 works on something else, right? And we have to alternate. And I kind of coordinated everybody's schedules to make sure that it worked out that I was available when they needed me, that computers were available when they needed them, which are all factors you have to take into consideration. But as your kids are moving more to transition, and also if you have the availability, some flexibility in that, like this year, we were able to save up and purchase an additional computer. So now all 3 of my students who have computer work have a computer to do that on. It's not their computer, but it will be their computer for school. And for that, we were able to, I'm now able to give them a list of tasks that they need to have done in that morning time, which includes several different computer skill set things. And I can give them that thing and say, I need all these done by lunch. You can decide what order you want to do them in. You can decide how long it's going to take you. But I need these done by lunch. So they can have that accountability. I can still check in on them before school and at lunchtime, but I don't have to sit over them and micromanage every single task and activity that they do. This also means that it gives me more time to work with my little ones who need more one-on-one. You also are going to want to think through your records. You want to know your laws as far as what records are required. And even if records are not required, I do recommend, as well as the HSLDA recommends, putting them together, having them for your own personal records in case anything were to come into question or in case you want to transition them to another school in the future. It's always a good idea to have. If you guys want to see how I put together my homeschool records, check that out above or down in the description below. But they have a great worksheet in here to help you figure out what kinds of things you need to put into a portfolio and how to divide that out so you can easily do that throughout the year. So what I do and what I recommend doing is after you've taken this big picture, zoomed out, you know what you're doing, you You know why you're doing it. You know how you're going to do it as far as scheduling. You know how you're going to do it as far as what supplies you're going to need, what your student specifically needs. You've got all of that figured out. That's really all you need to get started. And you might ask yourself, but Katie, what about the little lesson plans? What about the daily lesson plans, the weekly sheets? What about those? All right, so here's what I would recommend. You do what's right for you. You figure out, and it's going to take a little bit of trial and error. But what I recommend is taking a month at a time. Because again, we talked about if you plan out all these weeks and all these things get off pace, you might get behind, you might get ahead, and then all that work is for nothing. So what I recommend is taking a month and sketching it out. And this is the way this planner is designed. There is no weekly lesson plan pages, nothing like that. But it is designed that you are going to map out the things that you're going to work on, right? The different goals that you're going to work on for your kids, the different assignments. So I'm going to look at and say, all right, it's October. And my son is he finished off September with lesson 20 in his math, whatever. I'm just picking a random number. He finished off with lesson 20. I know he's going to do one lesson a day. I know he's going to get through lesson 20 through lesson 40 this week, or this month, not this week, this month, okay? Or whatever the numbers are. I know that we did chapters 1 and 2 in September, so for science. So we're going to do chapters 3 and 4 for October. So I'm just going to do a month kind of overview. Same kind of thing we did here, only much, much smaller. I take maybe an hour at the end of every month to kind of just check in with where we are and where we're headed next for next month. If we didn't hit a goal or we went over a goal, no problem. Just scratch it out, write it in there. Just get over the prettiness factor, make that note, and adjust your plan, all right? Then when it comes to the day-to-day stuff, you may want to provide your child with a checklist like I was talking about, but a lot of times you can just kind of do the next thing with your kids, and you can dictate that, and as they get older, then you can start passing over more of that responsibility. Maybe you'd want to do daily lesson plans at that point. It also depends a little bit on your curriculum choices and how much planning you need to do ahead of time. Mine are pretty open and go, so I don't need to do a lot of prep ahead of time. But then what you can do is if you do want to have those daily records for yourself, reverse lesson plan. So I know my general where I'm going, and now at the end of the day, it's the end of Monday, and I'm going to sit down and I'm just going to write down in a regular plain old notebook. Monday, we did lesson 12 in math. We read these pages in science. We did this, we did that. We had a cooking lesson as they helped us cook lunch. All of those things. And you can write down all the things you did do instead of trying to plan for all the things you wish you would have done. And you'll save yourself a lot of time that way. And I think you'll find in general that there's more freedom in that. And it'll also help you see the little things that you do that you don't think about. Because I don't ever lesson plan that I'm going to have my kids learn how to change the oil. But if they learn how to change the oil, you better bet I'm going to write down that they got to learn that, because that is a huge life skill, which is one of our life goals that I want them to have by the time they graduate. So if you can see where that's kind of going. Now, I'm sorry this video was super long. I wanted to keep it short, but there's so much information, and I feel like so many people out there are needing information on how to plan their homeschool year, and I hope this will be helpful. If you guys would like to get your hands on this planner and have the help of having that step-by-step process, I highly recommend going and checking it out. There is a link down in the description below, and I will also drop down there my review of it and like which pages I used and which pages I didn't, as well as a flip through of the book. And I hope you guys will stick around and subscribe to my channel, because we have so many cool videos coming up. Our preschool plans, like I said, our homeschooling room tour, our fun schooling Fridays, and other fun things. So be sure to stick around, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.